this kind of world in which we live is inhabited by its nature and can be manipulated by certain kinds of monsters, right? So like a monster is, as we understand, is representative of things that we need to be aware of, the things that we need to watch out for. And we see this in the apocalyptic narratives in the Bible, particularly in the book of Revelation. If you're familiar with this, we see these kinds of really crazy, wild, apocalyptic visions in this. And in that story, we see, and against that landscape, against that backdrop, we see monsters. And there's particularly these images of the beast. And we have this image of the dragon, which is this many-headed dragon. It's a hydra, right? Like that's what it is. It's this many-headed dragon. We have this beast. And a lot of times a way in which people understand this, a common way of understanding what this image symbolizes, is the idea of this kind of large-scale macro kind of political power that is seen in this sort of apocalyptic vision of a rising in the world. And it's this thing that's capable of controlling many things all at once, right? It's a dragon that has its claws in lots and lots and lots of different places and lots of different people, and a beast that can be in lots of different places at one time. There's this sort of like transcendent kind of quality to this particular vision of a monster. And I think that we see one of the ways that we see this playing out in the world today is through expressions of totalitarianism, is through expressions of control. That we are living in a time now where it is possible for the state, it is possible for these kinds of beasts, if you will, these kinds of large scale corporations many times, or political entities, to have a kind of control and have a kind of presence in the lives of many people and in many different homes in a way that was never possible before in the history of humanity. But because of the internet and because of technology, there is this ability for there to be a kind of presence, whether it's simply through advertisement or whether it's through data control and acquisition, or whether it is through surveillance. There's a possibility for there to be a kind of surveillance state that is reminiscent of Soviet Russia, except that now we see it happening where we have the listening devices in our pockets, right? Like we have the video devices, on us at all times. And there's sort of this question of like, wow, well, like what might arise? What kind of beast might arise out of the sea of that kind of world that we inhabit now? That's sort of chaos. We've talked about the image of the sea as chaos, and we can see a beast sort of rising out of that. That's the image that we see in the book of Revelation. And then there are certain places in the world where this is actually happening now, in certain totalitarian regimes where technology is used in that kind of way. And I would say here in the West that we are not immune from that. Like that is a very distinct danger and a very distinct possibility. So that is sort of like the monster at the top, you could say. It's kind of the big monster. But then there's sort of like another kind of monster that I think we see arising in the world. And we see this also in the apocalyptic visions in the book of Revelation, which is this, it's this image. It's a very different kind of image, but it's this image of a woman. So there's this woman that comes along, and in sort of the traditional parlance, the traditional language, she's referred to as the whore of Babylon. And she is this sort of woman that rides on the back of the beast. It's a fascinating image, but again, it's this image of some other kind of creature, some other kind of being that is connected to that, but in a different sort of way. And I think that if the beast, if the kind of the dragon, or this is this sort of like this image of this kind of masculine image, this image of this sort of macro kind of totalitarian political sort of image, I think that there's a way of understanding this image of the woman that rides on the beast as being a more kind of subtle, internal, kind of from the bottom up sort of expression of this kind of weird multiplicity. And the way that the way that it's described in the book of Revelation is that she is associated with commerce. She's associated with like materialism and like stuff and the acquisition of stuff. And then this is the way in which she sort of like woos the nations of the world in a kind of weird way. And I think that is also, we can see that playing out with us as well, that the devices in our pockets so many times are the way in which they kind of maintain control and connection over us a lot of times is through this sort of expression of materialism, of the sort of the perversion of the American dream, right? The always wanting to get and the always wanting to, if you will, sort of lust after more and more things and more stuff. And that's an expression of multiplicity too, isn't it? The kind of acquisition of things. It's like, how many things is enough, right? Like as we gather things, we know this statistically that human happiness only increases to a certain point, and then after that point, it's diminishing returns. And we actually become more and more slaves to our stuff. And so there's something there about materialism. But I want to connect this also even with the way that we see this online. We obviously see this through, as we say, advertisement and data mining, and we see it through these online shopping, all that kind of stuff, and just things constantly pulling at our attention, pulling us to run after different kinds of things. And these two things I think can go together. There's the one from the top down, the sort of surveillance kind of control sort of thing, and then there's the like running after lots of things and being distracted by. It's like basically these are really the two expressions that we see in the dystopian novels of 1984 of George Orwell, which is all about control from the top down, and Aldous Huxley, which I've talked about as well, Brave New World, which is from the bottom up, where it's like we're pulled, people are controlled by our desires, are running after all different kinds of things, whether those are material things or sensual things or experiences or what have you.